that you would be prepped for a competition, right?
Right.
Yeah. So like, that's the big one, realistically, is starting off youth young, like not necessarily like super young, but like, 8 to 10 years old. This is when they're really starting their athletic journey. Before this, kids should be having fun, playing, being exposed to as many different things as possible, right?
Yeah.
Once we get into the actual competitive, like, we're going to play sports, I enjoy sports, I want to keep playing sports, and I want to be good at sports. From here, that's when we're going to start devoting more time to competition at a younger age, to training, building up strength, building up confidence through different movement patterns is going to be really, really important. One of the most wild things that I've seen, and I talked to Milan about this actually yesterday, was in North America, it's crazy how few youth athletes know how to do the basic fundamental movement patterns. Right?
Yeah.
Like, do you know how to squat? Do you know how to lunge? Can you hinge properly? The amount of times I have to teach kids how to hinge, and it's such a struggle, is wild to me. And that's not inherently a bad thing. I just think it's a small flaw in the system.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dig into that. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Tuesday Podcast. I got Coach Devin here with me, and as you can tell, we are digging into some youth stuff today because there's a interesting prevalency of lack of understanding of youth development when it comes to sports, activity. There's lack of accessibility within that realm where parents want to get their kids into sports. Kids want to play sports. They want to do different things. And what has happened over the years is this idea around like all the activities, all the specificity. They're just playing this sport. I got a message the other day around my kid does 7.5 hours of soccer plus these other activities, and it's not wrong in the sense of parents wanting to put their kids into activity, but where there's a missing link is what you were just talking about, which is the underlying foundation that all of that ability is built off of with kids. And I mean, we see it. We have our youth strength and conditioning program. We have our junior weightlifting club, which is sport specific in and of itself. We have sport performance programs, and this ranges from kids that are 7 years old up to our sport performance stuff, which we have 16, 17, 18-year-olds in that. And arguably, across that whole range, there's a lack of understanding of the necessity to do strength and conditioning work and what that actually means, right? So you have some details that that you follow in regards to how you coach and how you guide your thought process around youth strength and conditioning. And so I think that would be a good place to start is what are the sort of windows of time that we can outline to give some information to those that are listening to this for their kids or for youth athletes, if they coach youth athletes, if they have kids that are youth athletes. What are those pockets of time that we were just showing and talking about previous to starting, that is how much they should be focusing on sport stuff in that age range, right? So when a kid is 0 to 6 years old, what should they be doing? Because I know there's a lot of times now where freaking kids are 4, 5, 6 and they're already doing hours upon hours of a sport specific work.
Yeah.
But what is the actual necessity in that regards? What should kids be doing in that regards?
From the ages of 0 to 6 is what you're saying?
Yeah.
So at that point, everything should be play oriented. Right?
What does that mean? What does play oriented mean? Because I think their confusion could be that my kid is doing activity.
Yeah.
My kid's doing sports, so they're playing. They're doing stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess inherently that's not wrong, but what would be a better play solution, or what would be a better thought process around that? In an ideal world of like a system, a activity that the kids could do.
Well, I think the big thing regarding that is it just has to be fun for the kid.
Right.
Right? It also needs to involve as many different movement patterns as possible. And ideally, we're not trying to specify that young.
Right.
We want to expose kids to as many different opportunities to develop as far as their actual like capacity and confidence of movement, more so than saying, okay, well, my kid's going to be the best hockey player or the best basketball player. They're only going to play basketball related games.
Right.
They're going to get a lot more out of trying different sports like soccer or baseball, things where everything has a different movement pattern relative to everything else.
Yeah.
That's going to lead them to have just better overall development. Right?
So, like, in regards to strength and conditioning stuff, there's this idea or concern that I think is more or less started to kind of get understood better, is that, like, you know, kids shouldn't be strength training and doing stuff too young. Like, that whole concept, I think more or less has been kind of squashed.
Yeah.
It still is there.
Yeah.
Because there still is a lack of true education. I think that's a fundamental aspect of why we wanted to do this talk, was because there's a lack of understanding of what strength and conditioning means for kids.
Yeah.
And so I 100% agree, and I like that concept of, like, yes, from 0 to 6, kids need variance. So that's where they're trying out different sport, different activity, and I'd say there is more kids seeing and being exposed to gym stuff, especially the last few years of people having garage gyms and stuff. Like, kids are getting exposed to push-ups and squats and picking up stuff and putting it down, and like that kind of stuff more. But what's, like, do you see that as an area of opportunity that could be expanded upon for kids in the realm of, you know, sport and activity? Like, personally, I don't see that area, that age range, getting exposure to a lot of strength and conditioning. Like, we used to run a younger age range here, and I think it would be dope to do that again. Where it is gameplay, it's in the gym, they're swinging on stuff, they're doing push-ups and whatnot. Because, as you said earlier too, was as kids start to come into our youth strength and conditioning program at 9 or 10 or 11 years old, what are we seeing? Like, what are you seeing with kids that are coming in at that age?
First, I would agree. It would be really cool to start kids a little bit younger with even game sort of aspects of just learning the fundamental movement patterns. I was recently in an elementary school working with fairly young kids, and the majority of what we were doing was playing games.
Right.
And they loved it. When I left, they really asked me to keep coming back. Actually, it was really cute.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it's super cute. But
what do those games consist of? Like, when you say play games, like, I think that's something that for parents listening or coaches trying to understand youth stuff better is, like, what are those games teaching them? What are they getting out of? Outside of just like, burn energy, go, my kid play and do burn energy because they want to burn that energy. Cool, kids have energy, and we can set them up for more success down the line with what's, like, the intention of those games.
So some of the games, and kind of how I structured it a little bit, was for the first 5 minutes, let's say that we had like a 45-minute sort of block there. For the first 5-10 minutes, we would do sort of a general warm-up where it would be us. We would just play tag, because with kids it's super easy to just get them to run around trying to play tag with each other. And then from there, once they've gotten a little bit of that energy out, we do a little bit of stretching and introduce them to the concept of, like, flexibility and just mobility. Once we got through that aspect, what I did was I set them up along a line, and I would have them do things based off of distance.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would say, okay, I want you guys to do lunges from here to where I am. And then I'm going to give you guys a set of like points.
Yeah.
Right? If I think that you have done it really well and like objectively it looks super clean and exactly what I've been asking for, after I demonstrate it, of course, then I'm going to give you a point.
Yeah.
And the points didn't really mean anything.
But to them, it's like
we didn't keep track. We didn't
some
keep
points,
track.
right?
Yeah,
it's a way to keep them engaged.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was just a way to keep them engaged.
Yeah.
I didn't even keep track of the points, if I'm going to be honest. But
to them, they were like,
they loved it.
Points,
they loved it. So yeah, it would be like lunges or just very simple ana moves like duck walks. I did inchworms. I did squats where they would pivot and then squat again.
So just for clarity's sake, because not everyone that's listening, want to listen to this or watch this, those are patterns like duck walks, inchworms. Those are patterns that are getting the kids into like a deep squat position. That's getting kids into a plank position where they're having to hold and control their midline and shoulder strength and shoulder stability, hip stability. So getting the kids into positions that are more, yes, kind of more specific in the realm of strength and conditioning kind of work, right? Like the principles of, you know, what do you need in sport? You need to be able to have midline stability, you need to be able to have shoulder health, hip health, knees, ankles, all those things that as kids age, as they get older and are playing sports more, when they come in, not to kind of change the direction of the conversation right now too much, but like as they come in, you start to see these impacts of like not doing that work as they come in. Like kids that haven't had exposure to sitting in a deep squat and they're coming in at 9, 10, sure they play sport, but they can't even sit down into a deep squat anymore. Which, as like you look at a kid, baby, 1, 2, 3-year-old, like they can pop into a squat, right? But then at some point they start to lose that capacity because they're not utilizing it. They're maybe playing sport that never requires them to go into that position anymore. And then we start to see these kids come in at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, and it's like they have zero capacity for that specific pattern. And sure, they're good at their sport, but I guess the idea is like, how does it benefit them? How does exposing them to that, especially like you just did in the schools early on, how does that work? And then the continued work like that benefit kids as they start to progress further and further into their sport? What does it do for them?
Well, when we have the proper sort of range of motion, we can then like strengthen it. We have to think that sure, they have all the specific strength through that range of motion that is required for their sport. Be that like just some running or whatever. But if they're ever taken to a position past that very specific range of motion that they have, there's going to be an increased likelihood of injury because they don't have that sort of strength there.
They haven't been exposed to that.
Exactly,
on a regular basis.
They haven't really been exposed to it. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
The goal of the first introduction to strength and conditioning is not inherently to have them lifting the most weight. It's not to necessarily progress things through trying to get as jacked as possible or as strong as possible. The intro to strength and conditioning for us, and what I believe should be kind of implemented, is just teaching the basics of fundamental literacy and just having kids move correctly.
Primary patterns, right?
Exactly, primary. So that if they ever have to do this, they have the capacity and the confidence to just do it.
Right. So like that younger age range, like the kids that you're working in the school, it was a lot of gameplay geared around incorporating these sort of fundamental principle movements of being able to squat, being able to hinge, being able to reach up overhead, being able to control their midline, and gaining strength in those patterns and ranges and challenging themselves with balance and coordination. So all sort of fundamental pieces. Then, let's say as they transition kind of from that, and now they're coming in here, and they're coming into our program here. And so we have kids starting 9 years old typically, up to 14. And so those kids that are coming in that realm, that some don't have sport background, some don't play sport, some do, and even still, just because they've played sport doesn't mean they have that movement competency.
Yeah.
Right? And so what changes in that realm or that time frame, age range for kids coming into that program? Like you're just saying that it's still not about, you know, getting super jacked and like lifting heavy loads, because again, I think that's a concern that parents have or think about is like are they lifting heavy? Are they going to do this stuff? Like what's it going to look like? And you know, parents hear like my kid's using a barbell or whatnot, and it kind of, there's some uncertainty or unknown aspects of what youth strength and conditioning looks like.
Yeah.
So when you talk about that and that idea of it's not about just lifting all the weights, it's further developing the strength in those patterns.
Yeah.
So when they come in, they're 7, some of them are 7, 8, but mostly are 9, 14 kind of age range. What does that strength and conditioning look like, and how is that beneficial for the kids in that age range?
So when the kids come in, we take a look at, depending on kind of where we are within the block, and how I've kind of always programmed it is we've had 2 main movement patterns that we are going to have, that we're going to focus most of our attention on. First one I can just use, for example, being a squat, and then the second one I usually do 1 lower body and then 1 upper body. I would do a press, so that could be something like a push-up or a strict press,
right.
Some sort of upper body pressing motion.
Yeah.
The first thing that we do is, regardless of how well that I know these kids and how competent they are in this movement, because it's a class-based structure, we're going to start off at the easiest possible progression. And that's going to be, can you guys squat and control your body weight through that full range of motion?
Right. So no load, just themselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
From there, if everything is looking good, we're going to move into a simple loaded variation. I usually use goblet squats, because it's front loaded, dumbbell right in front, and it's really easy. It gives a little bit of counterbalance, so it helps keep the torso upright.
So it starts to build connection with midline a little bit more, with back musculature a little bit more, strength through that whole structure.
And understand what it feels like to do a movement with
load.
load. Once we've gotten through that capacity there, the next one is I would introduce a barbell. So if we're going to be working on back squats through this sort of cycle of training, the next step would be using a barbell. So there's 2 possible options here. One being that the athlete would have good, solid movement pattern, being able to go through the full range of motion with the bar loaded on the back, which happens, but oftentimes now that the positioning of the barbell has changed from out in front to on the back, the mechanics do differ slightly. It does require that you're a little bit more forward versus quite upright with the goblet squat. So if the athlete is struggling to perform the movement, what I'll have them do is sit to a box or a medicine ball, to kind of help give an external cue of what this should be feeling like.
Right.
I use it as like a marker for depth where I want them to sit to. That's usually kind of how I do it. And then we build up competence through that sort of like, this is where we need to get to. And then once they feel comfortable and confident there, we'll try it without.
Right. So I think a key thing with all of that is, for purposes of people understanding youth strength and conditioning better, and like the benefit of it is, proper youth strength and conditioning program is one that is going to take into account and progress kids from not going from 0 to massive load. It's going from competency of patterns. So just like in sport, they go into sport, they learn how do you kick a soccer ball? What part of the foot do you use? Like, how do you plant the one foot and all of that? And that makes sense, right? Like, generally speaking, people understand, like, the kids are going to learn this in their sport. They're going to learn how to do this. And then when it comes to youth strength conditioning, and like gym setting of stuff, there's sort of this like, what does it mean? What are they doing? Are they gonna like lift all these heavy weights and stuff? It's like, no, they're gonna learn how to plant their feet on the ground in a proper squat position. They're gonna learn how to hold a weight and engage in a proper position. They're gonna learn how to, create force into the ground and push themselves up out of the position, right? So I think it's important that like everything you just outlined, all those steps, all those phases, kids are gonna be varied positions on that. Some kids are gonna come in and crush it and have like the ability to do a barbell back squat. Fantastic. Other kids are still going to be, holding a dumbbell in the front because that's what allows them to express the competency in the movement. Right. And that's what's important to understand. And that's where the benefit lies is that kids are getting exposed to the movement pattern and then challenged within that movement pattern to a place that they are competent in. Right. And so how, like, the way that I look at it and the way I talk about it with youth is like, and when parents ask me about their kids coming into youth strength conditioning, what's the benefit of it for their sport? My biggest thing, and let me know what your thoughts on this is that we want to train kids that are playing in sport to be the best athletes first before they become the best soccer players, basketball players, hockey stars, everything. And so to me, that means the best athlete is that they have the movement competency to be challenged in various positions, various ranges, and not have their shit blow up, to put it bluntly, right? Like I said earlier, most of the time when you play sport, you're in such a linear same thing again and again and again and again. You shoot one way constantly, all the time. And it's like, what happens? Why do a lot of injuries occur? They occur because they get pushed out of that position and they've never been exposed to it. So a kid that's gone from playing soccer from the time they were 5 years old up to currently 12, and all they've ever done is planted with their left and kicked with their right, planted with their left, kicked with their right, dribble, all those things, and then all of a sudden they get pushed out of that range, or they need to lunge for, try to lunge the leg out, and their leg gets pushed into a range it's never been into on the right leg, and boom, they've hurt themselves. And so coming into youth strength and conditioning and practicing things like lunges and step-ups and Cossack squats and push-ups and pull-ups and things that are going to put them in different ranges trains them to be a better athlete, because that is sort of the fundamental component of what sport is built off of. It's like their ability to control their body through as great range of motion as they possibly can, understand how to do those things, and then express it through sport. Right?
Exactly.
So as we've gone kind of like the young kids, we've gone the middle ground. How do things progress and change after we get past that kind of like, let's say 12 to 14 year range, and now with some of your sport performance teams, you have the 15s, the 16s, the 17s, the 18-year-olds, even older, that are definitely more sport specific. Like they're doing a lot of freaking sport specific work, and it's not wrong. They're definitely now specializing in their sport more because now they have opportunity to take this to the next level. They have opportunity to go to college and to do that. So how does strength and conditioning still benefit them, and how does it look in that range?
So strength and conditioning is like when we come into the gym to be doing stuff, we are building on an athlete's physical qualities, right? So as we were kind of talking about earlier, everything comes down to an athlete's basic understanding of movement and their confidence or their competency within those patterns, right? So everything that we do in a sport can be translated back to simple movements that we would be able to do in a gym, like a squat, like a press, like a lunge, whatever it may be, right? I'm simplifying it a little bit, obviously, but the intention of coming into the gym is for us to strengthen these base patterns, build strength, increase their rate of force development, improve speed and aerobic capacity. We're working on things that they're not going to get from just doing their regular tactical performance. Their tactical practices and game situations are invaluable for their sport. They need that. But without that extra supplementation of having that strength, they're not really going to help build that extra, they get to that next level. Like they want to be able to jump higher. Well, at a certain point, you just need to be able to get stronger to jump higher.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to then use that strength effectively, and we would use something like just plyometric training or Olympic lifting training to help train the body to use that sport, the strength that we've built.
To express that for it, because like, and you've seen this with like some of the volleyball players, is that you have some kids that come in and they can jump, right? And that's just a natural ability,
athletes,
right? They have a natural skill set to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And when you look at their jumping against, they can jump, but you look at the mechanic of it and you're like they don't necessarily know how to jump, yet they can jump.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like they got springs, and then if you're able to go and now refine that ability, teach them how to actually express force better, how to load better. Because like you said, you're simplifying the movement sound because it's easier to understand when we say something like a squat or a push-up or something.
Yeah.
But mechanically, how those play into a sport is like, patterns that require hip flexion, patterns that require, shoulder flexion, or a pressing pattern or movement, right? We're using patterns that are easy to understand, but kids and individuals in general have sometimes there's that raw natural ability to express these movement patterns, but then what strength and conditioning does for them is it teaches them how to refine that even more.
Yeah.
Because that skill's only going to take them so far.
Yeah.
Right? And we know this with professional sport, is that like everyone sees the highlight reel of professional sports. That dude's a freak athlete. Like, holy cow. And then you get those behind the scene documentaries.
Yeah.
Right? I always think back to like the Kobe Bryant stuff, which is like people always talk about how they finish playing like game or whatnot. Guys are going back and just like, oh, we're gonna go chill out, whatnot. And it's like, who's downstairs in the gym?
Yeah.
He was.
Yeah.
Because like it was not just on court shooting 1,000 hoops, right? Shooting 1,000 free throws. It was then, I'm hitting the weight room after to continue to develop the musculature, the movement patterns, the areas of limitation, mobility restrictions that are going to allow him to express, those fadeaways and those, jumpers more effectively, right? And so that's, I think, where as you get to the more specific age ranges of the kids are specializing 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, is now at that point they've reached levels that their skill set has sort of taken them. Yeah. And you can probably see the difference also with kids that have been exposed to strength and conditioning and those that haven't.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? It doesn't mean that the ones that have been exposed are going to be better than the kids that are just haven't and have this raw skill. Yeah. But there's a learning curve difference potentially there, right? Depending on the kid. It's very nuanced, of course, but depending on the kid.
Yeah, I find there are some that learn quicker than others. It does depend on the person. But when they do have a background and sort of a base understanding, it definitely makes coaching them and putting them through slightly more complex ranges of motion easier. Like I don't have to double back and teach them the stuff that is basic, right? That they need to know first, the fundamentals.
And I think something too with that is like taking this full circle back to the original sort of age range, which was the exposure of gameplay. And for a lot of times with kids, that tends to look like gymnastics or martial arts or something as a kid. Like the kids that go through that kind of stuff, or exposure in school to like gameplay, like movement patterns and stuff, tend to fare better later on. Yeah. Because those things teach them how to like an understanding of their body control. Yes. Way different. Yes. Than jumping into just a specific sport. Like not that gymnastics isn't a sport, it is, but it's such a unique sport in that it teaches you how to control your body. Yeah. Right? So that's, I think, what's also unique is watching the kids that have been exposed to that. And then when you get them in sport performance now, they're 15, 16 years old. Yeah. And you're like, you've had some exposure to like movement competency before. Absolutely. Right? Versus the ones that maybe they've just played a variety of sports. They're athletic, but they've never understood how to like twist and turn and bend and like squat and do those things. They've just kind of played sport. Yeah. Right? And there's a difference that you can definitely see. Oh, for sure. I definitely like with the people that I've worked with, I've noticed that, and we notice this as well when we look at our weightlifters, the ones who have a background in gymnastics,
have such a strong foundation coming in, and they do so well. One of my clients has a very strong gymnastics background as well, and she has just had picked up on weightlifting phenomenally quickly. Same thing with like what I notice a lot is people who start off with the strength and conditioning that we kind of do at a young age, when they decide, hey, I really like this and I want to stick to doing weightlifting or whatever sport it is, they have really big benefits. It's like the same thing. They pick up everything super well.
So on that front, with like frequency or ability to pick up information, I think we've identified the benefit of it. Like it's clear that there's benefit. There's a lack of accessibility, I'd say, in general, especially here in Lower Mainland. Like there isn't a ton of like really specific strength and conditioning stuff for kids out there, or at least knowledge around it. And that's why we're doing this, is like trying to give some information around strength and conditioning for kids, what it means, what the benefits are. So on that note, what would you say generally, like frequency based? Like kids are already doing hours of this and you know, sessions of that, sport wise, they're doing all this stuff, and then it's like, okay, now I'm supposed to add in it's like strength and conditioning for my kid. Like what does that look like? Like what is baseline benefit for kids that, you know, pick an age range, whatever you want to do that way, but what is sort of like the fundamental baseline amount that they would benefit from coming in and doing work? Like, would it be like doing like, would a kid that's 10 years old benefit from a couple half-hour sessions a week of some specific, you know, learning how to control their body, do some strength work? Would they need, you know, like the volleyball players that you see some of them, like teams, like once a week for an hour? And is that beneficial? Like they're seeing progress.
They are seeing progress.
Speak to that a little bit as far as the demand of time, because that's obviously a big thing for parents too, is like, how much time do I need to dedicate to this?
In the beginning, like when we're looking at strength and conditioning and things like that, less is often more. And it's really important to remember that if you're seeing progress with the minimum, there is no need to incorporate more, right? I've, again, like Morgan just said, I've seen huge progress with the volleyball players as far as their strength numbers have been going, and we've only been working with them once a week because they're in season.
And I think that speaks to like the idea of the lack of exposure to this type of work amongst kids and their sports, is that imagine if they were exposed to this more on a regular basis, right? If it was incorporated in a more effective way of twice a week, right? Like we get them, and it's like, we have kids that come and use strength conditioning 2 times a week or maybe 3 times a week at times, and they like, we have some freaking crazy strong kids, because they're being exposed to it and they've built up that. But to your point, it doesn't take a lot.
No, not
with kids. They adapt so quickly that it doesn't take a lot for them to see that.
Like I said, I'd like to see some of them more than once a week personally, because I think around 2 times a week to start is like really adequate, and I see a lot of super solid progress for a long time with 2 times a week, especially because they have so much other stuff going on. As their training age starts to mature a little bit more, then the volume has to increase. But like really, again, it's important to monitor and measure to gauge that progress, right? If we're seeing progress with once a week, why am I going to add a second one? If I'm seeing progress, if I'm going to see progress at 2 times a week, why would I add another one, right?
And I think that's too, is like for parents to understand as well, is like when those things occur, is like right now your volleyball players are in season, so they're coming in once a week and they're making great progress. There needs to be a time when they're off season, and that's, I think, something that's shifted, and we won't dive down this too far, but like so much now is like, okay, my kid's season is done, there's no break from it. It's like now they're into this thing for that sport and this thing for that sport, versus like take some time off, go and do something else. So it's like come and do strength and conditioning for 2 months or 3 months, right? And play that sport just for fun, just on the side a little bit,
Yeah.
right? But to have some separation from it, which I think is another conversation to have around like what should an athlete's yearly schedule actually look like, versus what it is right now.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
But yeah, any other final thoughts on that? Just around just youth strength and conditioning. Like, what would you like to see in an ideal world? Like, what do you think a beneficial thing would be for youth, and how can we improve that in society a little
Oh man,
bit? That's a deep. That's a rabbit hole question.
This is a rabbit hole question. Honestly, to keep it as short as possible, what I would like to see is a program that is structured and well developed that will facilitate growth from a young age into that point of when they're competing. Right? Like a very solid long-term athletic development plan. Because if I'm going to talk even about myself, when I was first getting exposed to like resistance training, it was as a teenage boy, just doing it on my own. And
high school gym
class, man. Like you learn, like I remember doing my high school fitness class, and it was just like the grade 12s were teaching the grade 9s how to do things, you know? It's like, it's not very well structured, and it's all just like bicep curls at the end of the day. So I'd like to really see a solid, as soon as they're confident and comfortable with like getting into sport and activity, we're starting them in some sort of like strength and conditioning program. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It's just really for them to have fun and enjoy and learn how to move effectively. Then from there we can then move them into that sort of okay, now we're going to teach you what loading is, and we're going to teach you what a back squat is, what a snatch is, what a clean is, right? Like things that are going to be super valuable for when you get to that next step in life, when it's okay, now we're trying to be good athletes. Now we're getting competitive, and I want to be the best that I can be.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally. So it's building movement literacy over time.
Exactly.
I think like there's all these programs that and from a society standpoint, like, we got soccer programs, we got basketball programs, we got all these things that are programs and funding related to sport.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a massive area of opportunity, like, grassroots side, we have youth strength and conditioning programs. I know other facilities have great youth strength and conditioning programs as well. And the thing is that those are unique, right? Like those are such unique things within the realm of kids' activity and stuff. Like they're not the mainstream of like, you can always go and find a soccer league.
Yeah.
You can always go and find a thing versus like having the funding and support that is like, here's a youth, strength and conditioning thing that society knows, it's not just related to these unique pockets of a gym facility like ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. It's this broader piece, a broader understanding of society looks at that and goes, as part of a kid's development is not just the PE in school.
Yeah.
It's not just at some point they go, I guess my kids should get into maybe some strength and conditioning, but I don't know what that is. It's that they have that access and exposure right away, right? When you say they get introduced to sport, and as they're getting introduced to sport, they're getting introduced to strength and conditioning as well.
Yeah.
I think it's changing a little bit. I think that there is more of it because the questions are being asked.
Yeah.
But obviously there's still a lot of work to do there. So.
Yeah. It's really just to build more confident, resilient athletes.
Yeah.
Right. My goal has always been to help athletes reach their fullest potential and be the best version of themselves that they can be. And yeah, that's really it, man.
And how you're going about that, expose them to these things from a young age, and then how that looks and progresses.
Absolutely.
Through that time.
And again, it's never too late to start.
Totally.
Right? Like
if your kid hasn't been exposed to it at 12, 13, 14 years old, it's not too late to start.
No, it's okay.
Right?
Like,
get them started.
Right? They'll still pick it up really fast.
Yeah.
And
there's still massive opportunity.
There's so much opportunity for growth. Like I see tons of kids start off at 10, like 10,
Yeah.
11, even like start of grade 9.
Yeah.
And then they start and it's like, bam, they get super good, super quick.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's never too late to start.
yeah.
I think it's just important that we continue the conversation around getting them introduced to it early on.
Yeah.
Understanding that it's of benefit because it's teaching movement literacy, movement competency.
Yeah.
It's building these kids to be better, just functioning humans in a movement sense.
Yeah.
Athletes as
Yeah.
well in a sport sense.
Yeah.
And that all layers onto it as they continue to progress.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Coach Devin, use strength and conditioning, you guys. Get your kids into it.
Please.
Thanks for listening. Level up.